The story begins in a damp cave enveloped by darkness, where terrifying screams echo through the walls. Their leader, a goblin with bloodshot red eyes, goes mad and declares himself the new leader. However, his comrade disagrees, believing that he has done the most work and should be the leader instead. Filled with envy and rage, he charges at his comrade, biting into the other's nose. The cave is now filled with chaos as screams ring out more violently. Other goblins gather around, watching the battle with amusement and betting on who will win. Chaos is their favorite pastime, bringing endless joy to these simple souls. Amidst the excitement, they discuss bringing out the prey to satisfy their desires. The old leader had hidden a human girl, untouched thus far. The goblins whisper to each other, plotting to find and take her for themselves. Some hesitate, because the prey is protected by a different goblin. Unlike the others, this goblin wears tattered clothes that cover almost his entire body. His appearance is terrifying, not only due to his attire, but also because of the aura he exudes, almost human-like. When the previous leader died, they believed this different goblin would keep the prey for himself. They stare at him, waiting for the chance to snatch the girl. Smarter goblins suggest waiting longer. Their strongest members have gone ahead to find the prey. The plan? Let the strange goblin fight those guys, take advantage of the chaos, kill him, and finally claim the prey. However, they don't expect the strange goblin to overhear their conversation. Realizing the girl is in danger, he runs back to where she's held captive, easily outpacing the other goblins. Horror awaits him. The rebellious goblins are ready to violate the girl. Her eyes wide with fear, she begs for help. The strange goblin speaks, demanding they release her. The leading goblin refuses. The old leader is dead, and he considers himself the strongest. But the strange goblin is determined to protect the girl. The big goblin and his henchmen attack, outnumbering and quickly subduing the strange goblin. Yet, he doesn't give up. He believes these low-level goblins can't defeat him. Most importantly, he doesn't want to die there. Seizing the opportunity, he used his weapon to kill the biggest goblin, instilling fear in the others. Never before had a goblin wielded a sharp weapon and attacked like a human being. The strange goblin pointed his weapon at the rest, his words emotionless. Leave or die. These words, coupled with the image of the giant's demise, quickly frightened them. The remaining goblins fled, shouting threats as they promised to return with reinforcements. Despite their departure, the strange goblin remained vigilant, refusing to let his guard down. He knew that this was just the beginning of the hellish days to come, now that he had chosen to fight against his own kind. The girl's name was Kelia. She supported him and expressed gratitude for saving her once again. She sensed that he was unlike the other goblins. He had never harmed her. She hoped he would survive. While it was true that goblins typically wouldn't protect a human, there was a deeper reason driving the strange goblin's actions. You guessed it right. He was a human just a few days ago. Dian died in a terrible accident. Instead of meeting God after being hit by a truck, he found himself transferred to another world with a system. However, the system wasn't fully activated yet. Apart from being able to see some stats, it didn't seem to have any other functions and appeared quite useless. But since meeting Kelia, she explained the role of those stats in this world. This world was ruled by gods, and powerful monsters roamed its lands. Humans had demonstrated their significance on this continent through absolute power. Unfortunately, the goblin he was reborn as happened to be the weakest and dirtiest monster in this world. His stats were extremely low, making him vulnerable to being easily killed by his own kind. Currently, he was at level 5 with HP 20, Strength 5, and Defense 5. These stats gave him an overall strength of 30. Fortunately, his name remained unchanged. He was still Lamphine. However, there was a way for him to become stronger here: mating with girls. In this harsh reality, goblins could enhance their strength through constant mating and procreation. The catch? Goblins lacked a female gender, so they could only mate with other female creatures. That's why goblins constantly plundered and kidnapped women. For Lim, a former human, this behavior clashed with his morals. Yet, survival demanded strength, and this dilemma weighed heavily on him. Seeing Lim Tian's worry, the girl reassured him not to overthink it. After spending days with him, she recognized that he was fundamentally different from the other goblins and genuinely didn't want to live among them. With a hopeful smile, she promised that when the knights came to rescue her, she would tell them about how he saved her. The knights, known for their fairness and justice, would likely agree to let him live in her village. Her optimism gave Lim Tian hope. He believed what she said. Even if the system couldn't activate immediately, as long as he persevered until the humans came to rescue them and gained their protection, he could survive. Then, he could slowly figure out a way to fully activate the system. However, things weren't as easy as Lim Tian had hoped. A scream, a sign of the goblin's return, prompted him to order Kelia to hide, and she obeyed. Immediately, the first goblin appeared, charging wildly at Lim Tian. It screamed that humans had arrived and expressed its desire to mate with the girl to become stronger. The goblin knew that once it became stronger, it wouldn't be killed. Frantically searching for Kelia, it became an easy target for Lim Tian, who swiftly dispatched the unfortunate goblin. Lim Tian then informed Kelia that humans were here to save her. Her face lit up with joy. She assumed it was a knight. She said she would go out to check. Lim Tian's face also brightened, assuming it was a knight. He hoped this was an opportunity to prove his worth. However, his excitement waned when he witnessed the knight easily dispatching the other goblins with sheer strength. The knight didn't exert much effort, seemingly venting his anger at these filthy creatures who had torn his clothes. Lim Tian studied the human's stats, utterly surprised. The knight's name was low.Later, level 25, with strength 30 and defense 50. Equipped with platinum armor and an iron sword, he possessed a total power of 400. This was the highest stat Lim Tian had seen since arriving in this world, making him question if low.Later was truly human. As Lim Tian stood there, amazed at how effortlessly the human dealt with the goblins, Kelia excitedly approached, addressing low.Later with delight. However, Lim Tian's joy turned to concern when he noticed low.Later raising his sword to attack Kelia. Reacting swiftly, Lim Tian pushed her away from the impending strike just in time. Despite saving Kelia from death, the sudden attack left Lim Tian baffled. The Holy Knights were supposed to be here to save people. Why were they attacking Kelia? Lim Tian assumed that because the cave was quite dark, low.Later had mistaken the girl for a goblin. But that didn't seem to be the case, as low.Later angrily expressed his disdain for a goblin having dodged his attack. Kelia quickly tried to explain that she was human, but low.Later silenced her. He knew who she was, yet he believed she had been defiled by the goblins and might even be pregnant with their child. To him, it was laughable that someone as filthy as her would expect mercy. Death seemed a more fitting punishment. Kelia begged him, insisting that despite her capture, she hadn't been defiled by the goblins. Then she pointed to Lim Tian, explaining that he was the one who had protected her. But unfortunately, low.Later didn't believe a word she said. The idea that a goblin had saved her and wasn't a human enemy was beyond the bounds of a believable story. He raised his sword to end her. Lim Tian couldn't believe what he was seeing. He didn't expect things to end so quickly. With no other choice, Lim Tian stepped forward without hesitation, pushing Kelia aside and facing low.Later. He hoped there would be enough time for Kelia to escape. Lim Tian grabbed his crude weapon and lunged at low.Later. This was an outcome he hadn't expected, but even if he had to sacrifice himself, he wanted to protect the girl. Perhaps this act would prove he was once human. But before the collision, an aura enveloped Lim Tian, leaving both him and low.Later astonished. This magic emanated from a woman dressed in white. Her aura exuded holiness and solemnity. She demanded that low.Later stop because she felt this goblin was strange. This woman was none other than Saint Ephra. Seizing the opportunity, Kelia crawled over and begged Ephra to save them. Ephra helped Kelia to her feet and presented her to Loader, who had tried to kill her just minutes ago. Then, Ephra turned her attention to Lamthin and asked if he could understand what she was saying. Lamthin was trapped within the barrier. According to what Kelia had told him, Ephra was the saint and the spokesperson for the divine temple. She could be his only hope of leaving this place alive. Lamthin quickly responded that he could understand. He took a deep breath and explained that he wasn't a monster of this world. He used to be human, but an accident transformed him into this goblin-like form. He could explain everything if she took him along. While Loader thought this goblin was just a bit smarter than the others, Ephra smiled. Goblins were usually stupid and lowly creatures, unable to think or speak fluently. Yet, this goblin could speak, and this might be a blessing from the Holy Mother. Ephra turned to Kelia and asked her to confirm if this goblin really hadn't hurt her. Kelia happily confirmed that Lamthin not only hadn't hurt her, but had also protected her from other goblins and provided her with food. This pleased Ephra, who realized the strangeness of the goblin. She decided to take it back to the temple and study it thoroughly before making any decision. Hearing this, Kelia was very happy because she had fulfilled her promise to the goblin. Ephra then turned to Lamthin and asked if he was willing to go with them. Lamthin was overjoyed and immediately replied that he was willing. Finally, everything seemed to be getting better for Lamthin because he was with someone who could listen and understand reason. With a snap of her fingers, Ephra quickly shattered the barrier that imprisoned Lamthin. She then ordered everyone to prepare to leave. Lamthin felt a sense of safety about his future, for which he was incredibly grateful. He immediately approached Ephra to express his gratitude, promising that he would repay her. But as he looked closer at her face, he noticed a cruel smile that took him by surprise. The next thing he heard was a sound he was all too familiar with, the sound of metal piercing flesh. He knew what was happening, but he turned back in fear. That fear was immediately confirmed. Kelia was dead. Her lifeless body lay motionless on the cold ground. Lamthin was stunned, unable to move. The shock was too great. Just as he thought things were getting better, it turned out to be a cruel lie. At this moment, the voice of the woman he had thought was his savior rang out, accompanied by cruel laughter. She mocked his naivety and declared that his willingness to follow her was the best way to repay her. Lamthin now understood the cruel reality of this world. A week passed, and in the village, the bell tolled, summoning everyone to the town square. As they gathered, Loader addressed the assembled villagers, announcing the devastating goblin attack on Brighttown. Fury ignited among the villagers. They demanded blood for blood, viewing humans and goblins as sworn enemies, precisely the reaction Loader had hoped for. After fueling their hatred, Loader began to praise the temple. He explained that acting on the temple's behalf, the knights had slain these goblins and avenged the villagers. Then, the holy maiden Ephra stepped forward. With her powers, she prayed to the temple, assuring the villagers that it would always protect its faithful. Her words instantly swayed even the previously skeptical villagers, reigniting their faith. They turned to the temple with renewed devotion and trust. Later, Ephra returned to her chambers, basking in the success of her speech. It was nothing new. These villagers were the most gullible fools imaginable. They would pray even harder, worship the temple more fervently, and bring her more offerings. Her smug satisfaction was abruptly interrupted by a voice calling her name. The person who called her name was the goblin Lamthin. He had regained consciousness, and it was clear he had been through hell. Horrifying scars covered his body, and one eye had been gouged out. Despite his injuries, a burning rage blazed in his remaining eye. Ephra ignored his words, a twisted smile playing on her lips. She was amazed by his tenacious spirit. It had been a long time since she'd seen such determination to survive. Perhaps this was why the temple hadn't eradicated all goblins from the continent. Lamthine's return to consciousness excited Ephra. She could continue her experiments, observing how the poison affected him. Lamthine, enraged, repeated his accusations. "You tricked me. You killed Kelia. Is this the true face of your temple? This so-called justice that humans boast about?" His fury was met with Ephra's cruel indifference. She silenced him with a sharp thrust of her staff against his mouth. She laughs, mocking his anger, and stating that, how dare a weak, filthy creature like him, a degenerate goblin, speak of human justice? She claims Kelia was under a spell and dared to speak for him, a betrayal that led to her death. "Goblins are nothing more than insects on this continent," she continues, "and it's a great honor that the Holy Maiden even speaks to him, and telling him to be grateful and use his wretched little body to serve mankind and the temple's experiments." The brutal torture continues, leaving Lamthine helpless to resist the endless, unbearable pain. Even when he falls unconscious, he's quickly awakened by the torment. He wonders if he'll die here, but he can't blame anyone but himself. Reborn as a lowly goblin, he had naively believed in the kindness of humans, not of his kind. His weakness and naivety led to Kelia's death. Captured by the villagers, low.Later and Ephra tortured and tormented him with every imaginable cruelty, taking sick pleasure in his suffering. Lamthine's suffering eventually comes to an end as he's tortured to death by the cruel woman. His only wish in his final moments, never to trust humans again. If he could do it all over, he'd crush their bones and drink their blood, but that's only if he could be reborn. As his consciousness fades, Lamthine awakens in a different space, a place filled with brilliant white light and twinkling stars. His body is fully healed. Before he can ask where he is, a system window appears, informing him that the Goblin Life Simulation System has been activated. He has died. A brief summary of his life flashes before him. Due to his naivety, he forgot he was a goblin. Humans will never trust goblins, and he died from torture and abuse. This pain will be engraved in his mind, and he will never forget. As a result, he is the most tragic character in the rebirth system. The system presents a choice: start again, or let his soul dissipate. Excited for revenge, Lamthine chooses to be reborn as a goblin 1 week earlier. A white light envelops his body, signaling the start of his Goblin 2.0 life. His eyes now filled with rage, this rebirth is slightly different, his chance for vengeance against low.Later and Ephra. To help him live longer, the system decided to grant him a little more power. Feeling the newfound strength, Lamthine smiled with satisfaction. Even if it was just a small improvement, coming back to life was the most crucial thing. However, it appeared that this was his only chance. The system immediately warned him of danger. People from the temple were approaching, and if he died again, he wouldn't be reborn. This revelation shocked him, but he didn't expect more. Being reborn once was already a miracle. Still not strong enough to take on the temple, he promptly asked the system for guidance. It introduced him to the Goblin Life Simulation System, which could simulate his life and predict future events. Each choice he made would lead to different outcomes. The simulations required 24 hours to complete, and afterward, he would earn points that he could exchange for items within the system. Lamthine found this amusing. The simulation method allowed him to glimpse the future, so he immediately began using it. The system reminded him of the current situation: escape from the Goblin Cave. To do so, he had two options. 1. Warn his goblin friends and unite to face the humans. Reward 10 points. 2. Hide in the cave and hope the temple people wouldn't find him. Reward 0 points. Lamthine considered his choices. Although there were 3 options, he was certain that even if all the goblins in the cave united, they couldn't defeat low.Later. The battle would end in their deaths, and he wouldn't escape. Nevertheless, he chose to simulate the first option. His hope was to earn enough points to exchange for a weapon from the shop, allowing him to execute a sneak attack on low.Later as predicted. After the simulation, all the goblins were killed. A complete failure. The system advised him to think carefully when making decisions and rewarded him with 10 points. Despite the failed plan, Lim Tian was pleased with the points he received and quickly accessed the system's shop. Numerous weapons materialized before him, but the problem lay in his insufficient points. The only item he could afford was a short knife, which would boost his movement speed by 10% and increase his strength by 15 points. He seized the knife, and the stats immediately appeared on his information panel. At this moment, Lim Tian recalled Kelia and wondered why he hadn't seen her. The system informed him that due to his rebirth, events in this world had shifted. Kelia hadn't been captured by the goblins. Instead, she lived happily with her family in the village. This news brought a smile to Lim Tian's face. He felt he had fulfilled his promise to bring her home. Now, with no worries on his path to revenge, he focused on escaping and surviving. He chose a narrow exit from the cave, anticipating fewer guards. Outside, only 2 guards conversed. These goblins were weak, making their tasks straightforward. Lim Tian listened carefully as they discussed their orders from low.Later. Kill any girl who escaped and prevent their return to the village. This conversation confirmed Lim Tian's belief that everyone in the temple was heartless, willing to kill their own kind. As a goblin, he saw no reason to show them mercy. Pinching his nose, he imitated a woman's distressed voice and pleaded for help. The guards immediately reacted, eager to kill the girl and claim a reward from low.Later. One of them entered the cave, knife concealed behind his back, reassuring the girl that he was there to take everyone home. But when the figure emerged, it wasn't a woman. It was Lim Tian, brandishing a sharp knife at the knight. At the exit, the other guard noticed his comrade's odd behavior and approached. Shocked to find a goblin standing there, he barely had time to react. In a flash, Lim Tian dispatched the first knight, who crumpled to the ground in pain. The second knight, overcome with fear, screamed, "You can speak human!" Lim Tian's blade was the only response to the knight's terror. Knowing he was no match for Lim Tian's power, the knight realized he faced death. In desperation, he begged for mercy, knelt, and pleaded for compassion. He showed Lim Tian a picture of his family, hoping for a chance to return to them. The knight praised Lim Tian's intelligence, claiming he would understand that he was merely following the temple's orders. He insisted he was forced into doing what he did. The knight even offered Lim Tian a bag of gold and a beautiful woman, promising to select the most alluring one for him. However, for a man like Lim Tian, who had been betrayed, these words only fueled his anger. The knight's true nature was exposed. He had planned to use Lim Tian's hesitation to kill him. But it was all part of Lim Tian's plan. He swiftly and coldly ended the knight's life. Lim Tian felt pity for the man's family, but he understood that sometimes ruthlessness was necessary. Evil needed to be eradicated, especially now that he was no longer human. His attention was drawn to a voice coming from the forest. It was low.Later and his men, heading toward them. Lim Tian quickly removed the knight's clothes and left in a hurry, promising to find low.Later and Ifra soon. Later, low.Later and Ifra arrived at the scene. They were stunned to find the bodies of the 2 temple knights. After examining the bodies, low.Later suspected a goblin ambush. The clean, swift cuts were unusual. Ifra thought it was impossible for a regular goblin to kill both knights. She believed a goblin capable of such a feat must be a mutated one. Low.Later agreed with her assessment, furious that the knights couldn't handle a mutated goblin, and allowing it to escape was a bad sign. Low.Later, enraged, kicked one of the corpses, while Ifra, her lips licking, couldn't control her excitement and cruelty at the thought of obtaining such a unique specimen for experimentation. Night fell, and the moonlight cast an eerie glow on the forest. Lim Tian panted heavily, relieved to be alive. He had run until exhaustion, but he couldn't afford to let his guard down. He tried to recover as quickly as possible to continue his journey. Realizing they hated goblins so much, he decided to use the goblin way to deal with them. Goblins could upgrade their attributes through mating and cannibalism, increasing strength and creating stronger generations. Lim Tian's mind was consumed with hatred. In this life, he wanted all men to experience only the happiness of death, and all women to kneel and weep at his feet, especially low.Later and Ephra. His thoughts were interrupted by rustling leaves. He grew worried, thinking it might be one of low.Later's henchmen still pursuing him. Without hesitation, Lim Tian stood up and charged at his opponent. The unexpected appearance of Lim Tian shocked and frightened the stranger, who stumbled backward. Lim Tian, too, fell forward due to inertia, but quickly regained his posture. To his surprise, this goblin exhibited characteristics of a female. Why was a female goblin appearing at this time? According to common knowledge, goblins were exclusively male and reproduced through mating with other creatures. Her presence had completely altered Lim Tian's perception. In his confusion, his gaze remained fixed on the female goblin. She, too, seemed to anticipate his actions, quickly sitting up and pleading with him not to harm her. She explained that she had merely been fetching water. This only intensified Lim Tian's worry. How could this goblin converse in complete sentences like him? To find answers, he employed his assessment skill to check her attributes. She was at level 3, but her profession was that of a god's messenger. Her titles included Fallen God and Pure Soul. Her attributes consisted of Blood 10, Energy 2, and Defense 1, along with the skills of Devour and Wild Growth. Her overall strength totaled 10. Lim Tian was taken aback by a special note. When a male goblin combined with a female goblin, they would become the legendary Goblin God. This revelation sparked an impure thought. Mating with her would grant him immense power. As if sensing the darkness in Lim Tian's eyes, the girl recoiled in fear. She revealed that she had been sent by the patriarch to fetch water. Failure to return would result in a beating. Seeing the girl's fear, Lim Tian spoke up, apologizing for unintentionally scaring her. He even patted her shoulder to offer comfort, cautioning her that crying might attract unwanted attention. However, the girl remained unfazed by Lim Tian's gestures. Instead, she was fixated on why he could speak as she did. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Lim Tian chuckled and nodded. Her curiosity was reasonable. Ordinary goblins couldn't communicate this way. Perhaps she rarely engaged in conversation with others in the tribe. However, Lim Tian's train of thought was once again interrupted when he noticed the girl clinging to his cloak. She praised Lim Tian, explaining that other goblins had mistreated her. This was the first time a goblin had shown her kindness. The girl suggested that Lim Tian return to her tribe with her. Lim Tian was surprised. He hadn't expected a nearby goblin tribe. Still unsure if the people from low.Later were chasing them, he needed to find a safe place to hide. His eyes lit up. This was an opportunity to recruit his first followers. He proposed that the girl take him to her tribe, and she readily agreed. Perhaps it was because she had never encountered a goblin as handsome as him. Soon, they arrived at the goblin camp. Lim Tian's appearance made the other goblins extremely wary. He was a stranger, dressed like a human, something they had never seen before. Lim Tian calmly observed the number of goblins present and decided to start building his kingdom from here. With a composed demeanor, he explained to the goblins that he wanted to join them and meet their leader. However, his proposal was immediately rejected. They deemed a freak like Lim Tian unworthy of meeting the patriarch. Instead, they planned to capture him and present him to the patriarch. At that moment, the girl stepped forward, blocking the goblins. She vouched for Lim Tian, insisting he was a good person. The commotion caught the patriarch's attention. His appearance surprised Lim Tian, a grizzled old goblin with a staff adorned with many skulls. He exuded ferocity, unlike any goblin Lim Tian had seen before. In addition to his attire, the patriarch possessed impressive stats. Level 25, Priest Profession, Blood 102, Mana 29, Defense 17. His skills included Devour, Summon, and Thorn Control. Equipped with a skull staff and bone chains, he boasted an overall strength of 200. Lam Tian's eyes widened with vigilance. He hadn't expected such a formidable goblin in this tribe. As the goblin leader emerged, he approached Lam Tian deliberately. His gaze shifted to the female goblin, questioning whether she had brought the stranger to the camp. The girl, her expression filled with worry, confirmed that she had indeed brought Lam Tian here, explaining that he had nowhere else to go. With terrifying red eyes, the leader praised the girl for her actions. But then, to her surprise, he issued a chilling order. The other goblins were to seize Lam Tian, intending to kill and devour him. The goblins, excited at the prospect of a meal, leaped up in glee. They shoved the girl aside and leveled their weapons at Lam Tian. Reacting swiftly, Lam Tian drew his own weapon, commanding them to halt. He claimed the ability to create weapons and proposed that joining their tribe would make them stronger. The iron knife in his hand immediately caught the leader's attention. The leader closed the gap, scrutinizing Lam Tian's face, claiming to detect deception. However, he also expressed curiosity about the weapons Lam Tian could forge. Lam Tian drew upon his knowledge of modern technology, explaining that he could craft weapons from iron, provided they could find iron ore. He promised that given enough time, he could create weapons more potent than the knife. Observing the leader's hesitation, Lam Tian emphasized that possessing iron weapons would give the tribe a fighting chance against humans and other monsters. The goblins began discussing the advantages of iron weapons. They recognized that, compared to humans, goblins were weak creatures. But with iron weapons, they could venture north to capture girls for mating. Faced with these immense benefits, the leader ultimately agreed to give Lam Tian a chance. He demanded that Lam Tian find iron ore and create weapons within 3 days, or he would be eaten. Not only him, but the female goblin would be eaten too. Hearing this, the girl became extremely worried. After giving his demands, the leader and the goblin horde left. Comforting the girl, Lam Tian looked towards the leader with a hint of anger and silently judged him as a cruel person, willing to kill even members of his own tribe when enraged. Lam Tian suppressed his anger, knowing that he couldn't defeat the leader with his current strength. He needed to use this time to create weapons and become stronger. The next day at dawn, Lam Tian led the goblins of the tribe to search for iron ore. By nightfall, the moonlight made the forest seem frightening. The female goblin was also with them. She was incredibly exhausted, stating that she couldn't walk anymore, having been on her feet all day and utterly drained. She received no help from her own kind. Instead, they beat her, called her ugly, and threatened to kill her if she didn't find the iron ore. She kept pleading, but the abuse didn't stop. They wanted to kill her right then and there for being lazy. Unable to bear the sight, Lam Tian picked up a rock and threw it at one of the goblins' heads. This action made them look at him with angry eyes. Lam Tian explained that he wanted them to follow and help find the iron ore, not to fight. He said he would tell them what iron ore looked like, and that if they wanted to live and return, they should go to the valley ahead and bring back some iron ore. If they didn't listen, he would kill them right then and there. Lam Tian took out his knife and glared at the 3 goblins with a terrifying expression. This threat terrified them. Imagining him killing them with the iron weapon, they rushed off to find the iron ore, not forgetting to threaten Lam Tian with death if he failed to create weapons. Lam Tian thought to himself that sooner or later they would kill him after obtaining iron tools. The task at hand was to become stronger. Observing Gobu's information, the notification about mating with her to become a goblin god caught Lam Tian's attention. He decided it was time to engage in adult matters. Seeing Gobu in tears, Lam Tian urged her to stop. He sat down beside her and asked if she wanted to follow him. He promised to protect her, provide food, offer a warm home, and ensure she wouldn't be bullied. The girl appeared confused, questioning the truth of his words. Lam Tian looked at her sincerely, affirming that everything he said was genuine. However, he admitted his current weakness and the need to become stronger to prevent further mistreatment. Gobu asked how she could assist him in this endeavor. Lim Tian felt a little embarrassed, but explained that mating would make him stronger. This revelation caused Gobu's face to flush. Suspicious, she asked if he was telling the truth, admitting she had never tried such a thing before. Lim Tian, flustered by broaching this topic, reassured her that everything would be fine and that he'd assist her if she wanted. Without waiting for her response, Lim Tian gently kissed her soft lips and then laid her down on the ground. The girl, embarrassed yet willing, agreed to bear his children. Shy sounds echoed through the air. Simultaneously, notifications appeared one after another, informing him that mating had raised his current level to 7. The sound of upgrading resonated, increasing his attributes as well. After some time, Lim Tian's body underwent transformation. His muscles became more defined. Now, at level 7, he possessed 40 HP, 10 strength, 6 defense, and a total strength of 65. The change surprised him. He believed that if he continued on this path, he could defeat the goblin leader. Lim Tian warmly stroked the girl's head, telling her that she was now his wife, and that he would protect her forever. Exhausted, the girl blushed and thanked Lim Tian, calling him a good person. Just then, a cry for help caught their attention. Looking in that direction, they saw a goblin running toward them in fear, closely pursued by a large wolf. What intrigued Lim Tian was the iron ore clutched in the goblin's hand. He hadn't expected to find iron ore here, but before he could claim it, he needed to address this immediate threat. Lim Tian swiftly drew his knife and instructed Gobu to wait. Gobu looked at Lim Tian with trust, reminding him to be cautious. For Lim Tian, this wolf represented a test of his strength. The wolf was about to pounce on the unfortunate goblin, who was desperately trying to escape. However, Lim Tian suddenly appeared, brandishing his sharp iron knife and charging directly at the large wolf. The fleeing goblin was utterly surprised by this action. Fear filled its eyes as it witnessed Lim Tian dispatch the wolf with a single blow. In the goblin's eyes, Lim Tian had become a formidable figure. When Lim Tian requested the iron ore, the goblin immediately handed it over, overwhelmed with fear. Holding the iron ore in his hand, Lim Tian chuckled with delight at its high quality. Now, they needed more of this precious resource, and upon their return, he planned to forge weapons for the goblins and their tribe.